She is really oblivious. It's obvious that younger women are better." My mother-in-law proclaimed triumphantly, snorting with pride. "Indeed, that young woman is cute and has glowing skin. I think the girlfriend my husband found is really attractive. But maybe it's just her looks? He he he. My name is Jenny. I am 45 years old, and I love gourmet food when traveling. However, due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic, my travels have decreased, and I have been passionate about making street food-style dishes at home. I've made delicious, juicy pork ribs and enjoyed homemade pizza. There is always a beer beside me. Ah, it's the best. As long as there is delicious food, I truly feel I can overcome any difficulty. However, there has been an incident that even I thought was too much. It happened in my 30s. When I came home for Christmas, my mother-in-law suddenly said, "Are you and your husband not getting along well?" My husband choked upon hearing this. Indeed, we had been having a fun conversation about meals with the family, but I was surprised to be suddenly questioned about our marital relationship. "There's no such thing." "Right. Oh, what are you suddenly bringing up, Mom?" "Hey, you two have been married for 2 years now, and I'm worried because you still don't have children." Ah. Haha, I did not clearly respond to my mother-in-law's words, only managing an ambiguous smile. Honestly, I have a strong aversion to such topics being brought up by my in-laws. Even though we are family, I wish they would respect our privacy. Both my husband and I have jobs and have been busy since we got married. While we do want children, we also want to devote energy to our work. Although maternity leave is allowed by company policy, it doesn't function well in a male-dominated workplace. There is little understanding for women who take leave, and effectively, there is an unspoken agreement that if you have a child, you should resign. We had almost used up our savings for the wedding, and there was not enough financial leeway for me to resign and still sustain our lives. Thus, my husband and I have discussed that it's okay to have children a bit later, and we have mentioned this to my parents-in-law numerous times. However, we are continuously pressured with, "Women have limited time, you should have children soon." They don't listen to our opinions at all. So, each time we visit home, the same topic is mentioned, and it has become a regular event. By now, I thought it best to get used to my insensitive in-laws and handle them casually, but a certain incident significantly changed my perspective. It was at the end of the 3rd year of our marriage. "Why don't you two consider getting tested for infertility?" my mother-in-law suggested, handing us a printed page from an obstetrician's website. She pointed to the reviews printed in detail, saying, "Look, most people who received treatment at this clinic got pregnant. People who didn't get pregnant probably wouldn't write reviews so easily. It's unnatural not to find even a 3-star review, let alone bad reviews. All the reviews are 5 stars. Such consistently high praise for the hospital makes me suspect that the clinic might be hiding unfavorable reviews." Yet my mother-in-law continued to rave about the excellence of the hospital to us without any suspicion. However, since she had not actually been treated there herself, she was just reading the reviews as if they were her own experiences. After a long time of not being able to have children, we started going to this clinic and were able to get pregnant within 2 years. The emotional support is also perfect. It alleviates any anxiety about childbirth. It was as if she was advertising for the hospital. Normally, my husband and I would just smile wryly and ignore this talk. It can't be helped. To make sure we're not infertile, let's get tested. My husband suddenly said that. He must have thought that if it was clear we were not infertile, the persistent demands would stop. I agreed with my husband's suggestion, and we decided to get tested for infertility. The test results revealed that I had infertility issues. Of course, it could be improved with treatment, and it didn't mean we could never have children permanently. If we really want children, then paying for treatment and actively trying to conceive would be a good idea. However, I was the only one who took this fact positively. "That's why you should have married a younger wife," my mother-in-law said, crunching on a cookie after hearing about my test results. My father-in-law also expressed his disappointment, saying, "It's sad to think we might not see our grandchildren. But it's not certain that we can't have children," I argued, to which my mother-in-law replied, "But you need treatment, right? How much will it cost? How long is the treatment expected to take? You are already 34 years old, aren't you? How much older will you be by the time your infertility is cured?" I was at a loss for words because I had felt this way myself. Unlike my mother-in-law, I had thought that maybe we don't need to go through treatment to have children. I could never say this out loud. In fact, neither my husband nor I desperately wanted children. Children would be lovely, but we thought it would be nice if it happens, or let's leave it to nature. We were not very upset even after the infertility diagnosis, and we did not take it as seriously as my mother-in-law and the others did. Age-wise, I had become an inconvenient presence for my in-laws, who assumed I could not have children. After the results, there had been jokes about us divorcing and finding another wife who could have children. Of course, my in-laws were not smiling. Fortunately, my husband always supported me. No matter what my in-laws said, he firmly responded, "We didn't get married because we wanted children. Don't even joke about that." My husband is an only child, and I understand his parents' desire to see their grandchildren, but childbirth and child rearing are my responsibilities. As my mother-in-law says, it indeed takes courage to give birth and raise a child as you get older. I have always resisted the idea of having children for the sake of my husband's parents, so I am deeply grateful to my husband for supporting me in this respect. I was truly satisfied with marrying a wonderful husband, but another challenge was about to test me. After my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law, who disliked living alone in a large house, suggested, "Why don't you live with me?" I really wanted to refuse this internally. I did not think badly of my mother-in-law, but I felt it was her own doing because of her previous sarcasm. I shared my feelings with my husband, but he was leaning towards living together, saying, "Mom is getting older. I don't think I can get along with your mother if we live together." I understand how you feel, but aren't you worried about leaving an elderly mother alone? That's true, but you understand that your mother doesn't like me, right? That's a different matter. What if, for example, She slips on the stairs while living alone. Dad used to be there, but her knees are weak. At her age, it wouldn't be strange if a life-threatening accident occurred. I was shaken by my husband's unusually stern tone. When I remained silent, my husband asked, "Since when have you become so cold?" I understand what my husband means, but I question myself if I really said something terrible. Despite my mother-in-law's repeated unpleasant remarks, my husband defends her simply because she is elderly, and I am enveloped in frustration. We repeated this conversation many times, and my husband never accepted my opinion, eventually leading to my mother-in-law frequently visiting our house and gradually starting to live with us. Looking back, it was clear that it wasn't my mother-in-law pushing herself on us, but my husband who had invited her. Indeed, my mother-in-law only came when my husband was at home, and I had no choice but to let her into our house. Eventually, my husband said, "This house is too small for us to live with my parents," and it was decided that we would move to his parents' house. This was probably the plan from the beginning. I was unaware that I had completely fallen into the trap planned by my husband and mother-in-law. And so, it was decided for us to live together with her. "Jenny, thanks for working until late, but please get dinner ready quickly." That's what she said, rushing me to prepare dinner when I came home late. Ah, yes. From the time it was decided that I would live with my mother-in-law, somehow all the household duties had become my responsibility. As mentioned earlier, both my husband and I worked, and when we lived alone, we shared the household chores. However, since living with my mother-in-law, she reprimanded me for letting her son do household chores and declared that I should fulfill my duties as a wife, making all the housework my sole responsibility. My mother-in-law herself does not work and spends her days relaxing at home. Even though she receives a pension, my mother-in-law spends it all on herself without contributing to our household expenses. Meanwhile, my husband and I had an arrangement where I paid for groceries and other daily expenses, while he paid the rent. Strangely, this arrangement has continued even after we moved into his parents' house. Ultimately, I am the one paying for both my husband's and mother-in-law's living expenses. My husband no longer needs to pay rent, and he spends all his income on personal expenses, which have become quite extravagant. He frequently buys new suits and even suddenly bought a new car, even though he previously had no interest in cars. When I ask for the living expenses to be shared, he only replies, "We're not living extravagantly, so your salary should be enough." My mother-in-law constantly argues that a wife should devote herself to her husband, and my husband often agrees, saying, "That's right." I witnessed the change in my once kind husband. My mother-in-law was harsh on me daily, voicing her dissatisfaction for various reasons. "Why do you serve such salty food when I have high blood pressure?" she would complain. And if I showed the slightest resistance, she would scold, "So ungrateful. Do you even realize I'm allowing you to stay here?" Her bullying was like a scene from an old drama. Despite feeling this way, I tried to ignore it. However, I was mentally and physically exhausted due to my busy work schedule and the lack of rest at home. Moreover, my husband no longer supported me. As time passed, he sided more with his mother and became increasingly arrogant. He would silently hold out an empty glass, demanding a drink, and showed willingness to comply with everything my mother-in-law said. Once my mother-in-law demanded, "Drive me to meet a friend at a cafe." That day, I was sick with a cold, suffering from a headache and a slight fever. Lacking the energy to drive, I honestly told them, "I'm sick, so I need to rest," but my husband scolded me, saying, "Don't be mean to my mother." No matter how much I explained, my husband wouldn't listen, and I ended up driving my mother-in-law. As a result, I had to pick her up too, and the next day I was down with a high fever of over 100 degrees and had to take a day off from work. Despite sacrificing myself for the family, no one took care of me. They avoided me, saying, "You might infect us," and told me, "We'll eat out." No one went shopping, so I ended up without food for 2 days, hardly eating anything while suffering from a high fever. My relationship with my husband deteriorated over time, and I thought about divorce. During this time, my company assigned me to a long-term business trip to inspect our overseas branch. The assignment was for 3 months, effectively making it a solo assignment. This opportunity seemed good to distance myself from my husband, and my allowance would increase during my overseas work. Thus, I gladly accepted the business trip offer and left for overseas, despite my mother-in-law and husband's complaints. When I returned from abroad and entered my home, I heard strange noises from the living room, including voices of my husband, mother-in-law, and an unfamiliar woman. Wondering what was happening, I walked into the living room. Suddenly, the unfamiliar woman exclaimed in surprise. My husband stood next to her with a frozen expression, and my mother-in-law, with a heavy sigh, placed her hands on her hips as if to say, "It's hopeless." I couldn't understand the situation at all. Who is this?" No one answered my question. They only averted their eyes. I asked again more forcefully, "Who is this woman?" Although I nearly knew the answer, my intuition told me so. At that moment, my mother-in-law looked around at the two of them and said, nodding, "There's no problem, right?" "You really are oblivious. It's obvious that a younger woman is better." My mother-in-law laughed. "That statement, you're acknowledging that my husband is having an affair, right?" "Yes, that's right," my mother-in-law answered. As my mother-in-law stood boldly, my husband looked uneasy. Should I take that as the truth? Then I pressed sternly, and my mother-in-law and the woman urged my husband, "Tell her that's true." With a complicated expression, my husband admitted, "My mother is right. As you can see, Jenny, you no longer have a role here. From now on, Katie will be my daughter-in-law," my mother-in-law declared, embracing the woman named Katie. "Katie is only 20 years old, has no fertility issues, and unlike you, who are older and may find childbirth difficult, Katie has the potential to have many children. We can finally meet our grandchildren." My mother-in-law laughed contentedly, and Katie blushed and smiled shyly. My husband simply couldn't keep up with my mother-in-law's and Katie's excitement. Eventually, my mother-in-law pressured her son, "You have complaints about Jenny, don't you? Say it now." Finally, he spoke up, "I want a divorce. You understand, right? This house needs a young woman who can have children. Just disappear quickly," he declared all at once. After finishing his statement, he looked satisfied with himself. Watching this, my mother-in-law and Katie applauded, turning the environment completely hostile against me. However, I had already reached a certain realization. This woman, I had seen her before. She was definitely that person. I laughed to myself. They know nothing. They should enjoy kicking me out while they can, because it's just temporary happiness. Oh, how pitiful. Hey, that woman. Haven't you seen her somewhere before? Huh. In response to my husband's surprised face, my mother-in-law coldly mocked me. Are you making excuses? Meanwhile, Katie stared at me with wide eyes, her expression tense. You know about the Ross residence, right? Huh? Ah, yes, I know it, but what about it? Does it matter now? Does it really not matter? Recently, there have been rumors around the Ross residence about a young woman frequently coming and going. Katie, was it? Him. You look very much like her, exactly like her. At those words, my mother-in-law suddenly let go of Katie's shoulder and stepped back. My husband also exclaimed softly, then shouted, "Who would believe such a lie?" The Ross residence is a well-known luxurious house in this area, and no one knows the specific details of the business conducted there. But the house has a gate and surveillance cameras and sometimes guards, giving it an eerie, fortress-like atmosphere. Although their faces are not similar, the house is home to many stern-looking men, and the particularly grim-faced master is called boss by everyone. All the cars visible from the outside are black luxury vehicles, and the nameplate emits an indescribable eeriness. Because of such an atmosphere, even mischievous elementary school students passing by the house do nothing and quietly walk past. That is the infamous Ross residence. Again, no one knows the specific industry of that house. However, the local people tacitly understand it as that kind of thing. That says it all. Mother, you have lived in this town for a long time, so why didn't you notice? Oh, is it because I was pushed to take over the community work? Too bad, I said sarcastically, smiling at her, and she glared at me with a perplexed expression. If you do something wrong, it comes back to bite you. Thanks to my taking on the unpleasant role, I got my hands on various pieces of information. There's no way Katie is involved with such people. Show me proof. If there's no proof, I won't believe it, my husband declared to me. Indeed, there is no proof. It's not like I knew Katie was having an affair and followed her around taking private photos like in a story, I replied. You're just a liar. You're being persistent in trying to avoid a divorce, he retorted. My mind is made up. Let's divorce as you wish. I earned well during my business trip abroad, and I finally decided on a new place to live. You might not have noticed, but I've been preparing for a divorce for a long time. Shut up. It's not you who's leaving me, I'm the one leaving you, he snapped back. There's no need for such arrogance towards a wife you're divorcing. How narrow-minded. But it's all right now. The connection to the Ross residence is scary, isn't it? I want to proceed with the divorce as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Katie was smiling throughout. Her maintaining a calm demeanor without saying anything seemed to validate my words. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I proceeded with the divorce preparations and left my in-laws' house, but a certain thought grew stronger. and a week later I called my husband to meet. "What's the idea of suddenly calling me out? You still have feelings for me," he said provocatively. "Just come along, we can talk after that." I led him quietly to a certain place. "You really are heartless. That's why you're being divorced," my husband remarked. "Why should I show affection to a man who's about to divorce me?" I retorted. "That attitude of yours is the problem." "Wait, where is this?" My husband lost his words halfway through. "Notice anything?" I asked. "Hey, you're not thinking of taking me to the Ross residence, are you?" "That's not happening," my husband objected. "There shouldn't be any problem. You yourself denied any connection between Katie and the Ross residence," I pointed out. "Ah, right," my husband admitted. "So just prove it boldly. Show the evidence that Katie is innocent," I suggested. "Well, yes. Even if we go to the house, Katie shouldn't be at the Ross residence at this time." "Why shouldn't she be there at this time?" I inquired. "Katie is taking care of her sick mother and she's a college student. She works at a bar at night, but right now she should be either at college or with her mother," my husband explained. "She works at a bar at night, huh?" I noted. "Hey, what's with that look? She's not just some nighttime woman. She hates working at the bar. I'm going to support her from now on," my husband defended. "Hey, ma'am, if you say so," I responded. His enthusiasm for Katie didn't stop there. His story continued at length, settling into a summary of a middle-aged man passionately pursuing a relationship with a college student he met at a nightclub, who's in an unfortunate situation. This story really bore no fruit. My husband had met her just before I went on a business trip. A mere 3-month relationship. Her sick mother? And the fact he coincidentally met a beautiful college student. Each episode was too perfect to believe. But setting that aside, as I listened to my husband's story, nodding occasionally, the Ross residence came into view. The grand gate made it impossible to see inside. I said to my husband, "Well, it might take about 3 hours. It's suspicious in front of the house, so if you wait on the bench in the park across the street, you can see if Katie shows up." 3 hours, my husband exclaimed. Indeed, it was a long wait. But I continued. "It can't be helped. If you want to go home, you can. But you also want proof that Katie is innocent, right? Otherwise you'll always be bothered by it." My husband pondered this. It seemed my point hit home. In the end, without clearly saying whether he would wait or not, he stayed with me at the spot. As a couple about to divorce, we spent a long time together with barely any conversation. In the silence, about an hour and a half later, the gate of the Ross residence opened. It was my first time realizing that the gates of this luxurious house opened automatically. Oh, such incredible wealth. The gate opened, but no car or person appeared. As we feared harsh treatment from the residents for our apparent surveillance, we continued to watch. And then, "It's been a while, let's go somewhere together." "Sure, it's been a while since I walked," said Ross, appearing with several men and Katie. Seeing the two of them arm in arm, my husband's face turned pale. Katie," he shouted and, without thinking, ran towards Katie and Ross. As expected, my husband could not approach them and was immediately restrained by the men. For these sturdy men, a man like my husband posed no threat, and they half smiled as they dismissed him. "What's this guy?" Surprised, Katie stopped him. "Ben, why are you here?" Katie: "Who is this man? Are you betraying me? To address my daughter so casually, you've got some nerve. What?" At that moment, Katie gave a wry smile, and although I couldn't see my husband's face, he was probably pale. Meanwhile, Ross, showing a broad smile I had never seen before, was gripping my husband's collar. The men restraining my husband seemed even stronger now. The hostility towards my husband was clear. "Daughter?" "Yes. Any complaints?" "No, not at all." "Ha ha. What a lovely daughter." Initially, I also mistook Katie for Ross's lover, but she was indeed his daughter. That was a shock. The men also referred to her as Miss, confirming it. I was surprised that such a beautiful woman could be the daughter of a man as imposing as Ross, but upon closer inspection, her distinct features did resemble his. Women wear makeup, so their natural appearance can look quite different. "Huh? That means my husband." "Who exactly are you? You didn't try to mess with my daughter, did you?" While saying this, Ross pulled on my husband's collar even harder. A thought crossed my mind. Is that what this is about? This is scary. "I'm sorry, I've been seriously dating your daughter," my husband exclaimed with agitation. Ross continued to stare at him with a stern look, as if sizing him up. "Seriously dating, you say? What are you talking about?" "Please, don't make me laugh. Actually, I am this man's wife." "What?" Despite the overwhelming presence of the men around us, I stepped between my husband and Ross. Once I appeared, everyone but my husband was stunned and couldn't move. You dared to fool around with my daughter." Ross, furious, slammed my husband to the ground. My husband desperately pleaded. It's not true, but the fact that he had an affair despite having a wife did not change. Silence. "You'll regret messing with my daughter." "Wait. Katie. She said she needed to take care of her sick mother and couldn't marry until she graduated from college. I planned to get divorced by then and have everything arranged." "That makes no sense. I'm already divorced from my wife and my daughter isn't a college student. So you plan to play a double game for years." "What?" "Oh." My husband was stunned by Ross's response. He seemed shocked to learn that she was neither a college student nor had a mother. "Well, I had a feeling about that. Given her sophisticated makeup, she didn't seem like a college student." "Katie, were you really lying?" my husband pressed. After a wry smile, Katie replied, "You shouldn't take a woman's words at face value, Ben." "What is the truth then? Why would a daughter of such a household work in that kind of place?" Most of it was a lie. Working at that club was sort of a social experiment, but now that my father has found out, I have no choice but to quit, Katie explained. Ross responded to her puzzled look with, "That's only natural." However, it seemed he was not angry about his daughter's actions. From every move she made, it was clear that Ross deeply loved his daughter. "Didn't you love me?" Katie only responded with a wry smile, avoiding a direct answer to my husband's question. It probably felt to her like they had just been dating for a little while. It appeared she was under strict control from her stern father. For my married husband, perhaps she was just a convenient affair partner. If she was a child from such a family, even if sued for damages, she wouldn't need to worry. Her father would surely take care of it. Anyway, don't think you can mess with my daughter and get away with it. While saying this, Ross again strongly pulled my husband's collar. Even if Katie agreed to the affair, it was an unreasonable situation. However, as a wife who was cheated on, I actually felt a sweet victory despite keeping it a secret. Just as Ross was about to hit my husband, Katie intervened. "Dad, that's enough." Following his daughter's words, Ross, after a brief conversation with her, said, "If you say it's okay and let my husband go," signaling to the men around to release him too. Unable to move from fear, my husband was on his knees, tears in his eyes. Since my husband couldn't stand up due to shock, I took him back to his parents' house, and that day's events were resolved. A few days later. Help me. Suddenly, my husband contacted me on my cell phone. What happened all of a sudden? As far as I'm concerned, I want to proceed with the division of property first. We can talk about that later. Please, it's urgent. Katie came to our house. What about it? Aren't you two supposed to be separated after that incident? I was going to do that. Please, I'm desperate. Get involved. I couldn't help but think, why should I? But at the same time, curiosity stirred within me. This could get interesting. I had no intention of helping my husband, but driven by curiosity, I headed to his parents' house. There, Katie, my husband, and my mother-in-law were all arguing in different ways. Please, I can't be in this house anymore. Why? Didn't you two want to have children? Actually, I'm pregnant. How do I know if it's really my child? What are you saying? At that time, I was with no one but you, Ben. Oh, this is. Listening in, it seemed that Katie was pregnant with my husband's child. That must be why she came all the way to his parents' house. Since my mother-in-law had partially accepted her into the family already, the pregnancy itself wasn't surprising. However, my husband apparently did not want anything more to do with Katie and was reluctant to accept the child as his. How can you expect me to believe that? I'm not even sure if you ever loved me. How can I believe it's my child? As my husband shouted, the atmosphere around him froze. I was there as a detached observer, but it wasn't the time to chime in with, "Hey, look who's here." Still, when my husband saw me, he looked relieved. "You finally came. I want to make things right with my wife. Just give up." What? I have no intention of that. As I frankly stated my true feelings, my husband frantically pleaded, "Just cooperate with me for now." Even knowing it was a lie, it was hard to accept. Katie, I no longer have any interest in this man. So if you really are pregnant, you should make him take full responsibility." As I said this, my mother-in-law shouted, "Don't butt in. We were trying to welcome you back into the family." "Huh, what are you thinking? You guys are the ones who will be in trouble if I refuse to remarry. What's with that attitude?" Well, Mom. Please don't make Jenny angry." "Sorry, Jenny." Considering the situation, it seemed both my husband and mother-in-law were showing respect towards me. That actually felt pretty good. "What's that about? You're really too much," Katie muttered quietly, facing down, speaking the plain truth. True to Ross's daughter. As she spoke, both my husband and mother-in-law froze. Her anger must have gotten through to them. Just as the two tried to make excuses, Katie picked up her phone and said, "I'm sending Dad over," then hung up immediately. Anyone could guess what was about to happen next. My mother-in-law slumped down, saying, "It's over," and my husband tried desperately to comfort Katie, but it was too late. Once she took offense. Within 10 minutes, a black car quietly stopped in front of my in-laws' house. Several robust men got out and quickly shoved my husband and mother-in-law into the car. "Stop. Jenny, please help," my mother-in-law cried, tears and snot running down her face. My husband also pleaded, "Please call the police. Call the police," but before he could finish his sentence, the car carrying them sped away. Did I call the police? Absolutely not. I pretended not to see because I didn't want to get involved. A few days later, I received a call from my husband to discuss the division of property. Thinking that we were finally getting divorced made my heart feel lighter. I couldn't help but smile throughout the negotiation. My husband had been reluctant before, but on this day he agreed to everything I said. As a result, the division of property and the compensation turned out very favorably for me. I avoided receiving any money from Katie, feeling it too risky, but my husband took care of it instead. It took some time, but I feel it was the best possible outcome for my divorce. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was in a sorry state that day. His arm was fractured, and his arms and legs were covered in bruises and wounds. While his face was strangely unscathed, every little movement he made let out a small cry of pain, indicating his body was severely injured. He was listless, and during our conversation, he hardly said anything beyond "yes" or "that's right," making the divorce discussion surprisingly smooth. My mother-in-law had no physical injuries but stared into the void with a vacant expression and hardly spoke. I don't want to delve into specifics, but anyone can assume they were treated roughly at the Ross residence. Having escaped that situation, my married life ended as I had hoped. Later, I met my husband just once more to sort out some belongings, but my mother-in-law had broken down mentally and was almost like a vegetable. My husband seemed psychologically cornered as well, and the sight of him caring for my mother-in-law was truly pitiful. The Ross residence seems to be paying compensation, childbirth costs, and child support. However, when I recently saw Katie, her belly wasn't noticeably large. Whether she was actually pregnant remains unclear, but given that household's nature, my husband and others probably wouldn't dare contest it even if they knew the truth. There's a saying, Let sleeping gods lie, and it's exactly about not meddling with things one shouldn't have touched. Meanwhile, I was offered a promotion and a position at an overseas branch by my company. Yes, it's the same branch I visited on a business trip. I had been offered promotions before, but I declined due to family circumstances making full-time work difficult. However, following the divorce, I decided to fully enjoy life. Accepting the promotion and working energetically abroad, I returned to the US to receive even more promotions. Furthermore, a younger colleague who worked with me on a project unexpectedly confessed his feelings. Did I remarry? Actually, I've had enough of marriage, and I'm not officially dating him. We do go out to eat together a few times a week, though. People around us might think we're a couple, but that's not the case, or so I'd like to think. He says he'll wait until the boss gives the okay, calling me boss, which is quite endearing. It's been 6 years since his confession, and while my heart has inclined towards him, I still want to be cautious. Do I feel sorry for him? Certainly, there are times I feel that way. Sweet, poignant emotions stir my heart occasionally. If the project we are working on together succeeds, I intend to respond to his feelings. Perhaps the day will come when my role changes from boss to Jenny. Grace, are you there? Can you open the door? She frowned at the noisy voice. It was the usual voice of her mother-in-law. She wished for a bit more consideration. She had been enjoying her comfort. Open the door. Wanting to avoid troubling the neighbors, she reluctantly opened the front door. You can't even have children, yet you think it's okay to just walk out on everything? As a wife, that's unforgivable. Her husband, his mistress, and her mother-in-law were all gathered together. What? Considering the new wife and the grandchild that's on the way, we'll take this house as part of any property division. Please leave. Yes, please leave right away. That's right. Farewell, you infertile. They said it without any hesitation. They didn't realize what they were misunderstanding. My name is Grace. I am a 43-year-old office worker. My husband, Cesar, is a year younger than me. We wanted to naturally have children, but it never happened. After many discussions, we chose to live with just the two of us. I have no regrets. Since getting married, we've lived in an old but convenient one-bedroom apartment. While living modestly, we save money for our own home. I recently transferred to the planning department at work, which I had always hoped for. The tough job in sales paid off, I was promoted smoothly, and I've become trusted within the company. For me, without children, my work is my passion. However, my husband was in a different situation. What? You quit your job again? Yes. Why did you do that without any discussion? I was lost for words due to the shock. I refused a transfer, and my boss became annoyed. And you decided to quit because of that. That's what happened, but actually I'm at a loss. I was unjustly fired. I sighed. In that case, you should sue for compensation. No, I don't want to make a big deal out of it. Why not? I understand. In reality, it wasn't an unjust firing. This is a problematic habit of his. He can't keep a job. It's not that he's unserious, but he suddenly gets fed up and quits. Every 2 or 3 years, changing jobs has become the norm, and each time it disrupts our household budget and our rhythm of life. As a partner, it's hard to say he should endure even the tough jobs. However, we're already in our 40s. Frequent job changes only increase the drawbacks. There are times when I feel fortunate we don't have children. My support alone won't be sufficient for a family with children. If something happens to me, will he be able to support us? I knew this, but as time passes, reemployment doesn't progress as expected. The timing is certainly bad, but age and past career history are also factors. He can't hide his irritation. He doesn't do any housework and just stays at home sighing all day. If he has time, he should at least tidy up the room he messed up. I think I have more right to be irritated. I felt like complaining about something. The house was small, and there's no escape, which made it tough at times like these. I tried to calm down. Fighting wouldn't accomplish anything. I held back my complaints and watched how my husband was doing. The job he eventually secured was a contract position at a factory. It wasn't what he hoped for, but it was better than being unemployed. Let's move forward step by step again. We can overcome this if we're together. That's what I was thinking when I received a call from my mother-in-law. Hello, is this Grace? Mother-in-law, what's the matter? I've heard that you've been cold to Caesar. What? I was so surprised that I let out a strange sound. I didn't know what she's referring to. Are you being harsh to Caesar, who is hurt from being fired? Please wait, mother-in-law. That's not the case at all. What in the world is she talking about? I want to ask her the same. Did you harshly tell him to find a job quickly or clean up? I didn't understand how it came to this. It's true that I have indirectly mentioned things like, "It would be nice if you could find a job soon, or please clean up the mess you made." However, I never spoke in a commanding tone. This is also one of my husband's troubling habits, reporting everything to his mother as soon as something happens. Moreover, he tends to exaggerate the facts. It's also a problem that my mother-in-law always believes him immediately, but I wonder when she will finally let go of her child. That's unfair. Caesar wouldn't criticize you, would he? There's no reason for that. Why would you say that? You think you shouldn't be criticized. Isn't it your fault you can't have children? What? There are things more valuable than a job. Regrets won't turn back time. Why is it considered my fault that we don't have children? It seems my husband is telling convenient lies. We agreed on this together, yet I feel betrayed. He might want to save face, but turning his mother against me to make me the villain is childish. As a couple who have been together for a long time, I believe we should maintain trust, so I decided to talk to my husband that night. Please don't exaggerate things to your mother. If you have any complaints, tell me directly. Let's do that considering our future, shall we? My husband, seeming uninterested, started fiddling with his phone during the conversation. Please listen. Be quiet. I'm getting a call from work. With that, he left the seat. The discussion did not continue afterwards, and he just disappeared into the bedroom. Was he in a bad mood, or perhaps tired from his job at the factory? It couldn't be helped. I had to try to talk to him again later, but the next day he avoided the discussion again, saying he was tired and sleepy. The following day, he returned home late at night from a welcome and farewell party at work. He spent the entire day in bed with a hangover. In the following days, he was late coming home due to overtime and social obligations. He is clearly avoiding the issue. He intends to leave things ambiguous, but that won't solve anything. The baseless accusations from my mother-in-law are painful. I rubbed my eyes as I waited for my husband to return. We shouldn't keep postponing the problem. One late night, My husband returned home in a good mood, humming, "Welcome back. You're up? What a surprise. What's up? Did something happen? I was waiting for you, Caesar." "What?" He looked annoyed. "Why are you avoiding this? You're being noisy. You're acting strangely. You're persistent. If there's something, just write it down on a note." "A note? You mean we don't have to talk directly?" "Yeah. Are you still hung up on that old issue?" Really persistent. I was stunned by his words. Has he forgotten our marriage vows? He nodded when I said that an ideal couple understands each other. "I used to like your seriousness, but now you're inflexible and oppressive. If you don't want to lose me, you need to change your attitude. There are plenty of other women." "What do you mean?" "Just what I said. Are you having an affair?" "I've been harboring doubts about my husband's recent behavior." "Are you joking?" "What have I done wrong?" "I'm telling you, you're being annoying. Do you want a divorce?" "Don't use that kind of language." My husband clicked his tongue. He pulled a green paper from his bag and thrusted it at me roughly. It was a completed divorce form. "Why do you have this?" "I was asked to fill it out." "By whom?" "You should be able to guess." "No, I don't understand." "There's a woman who wants me to submit it." I was at a loss for words. Was my husband asked by his affair partner to write this divorce form? Don't act so high and mighty when you understand. You're useless without me. My hands trembled as I clutched the divorce form. My heart rate increased. "What time do you think it is?" "I'm going to sleep. You should cool down somewhere else." My husband disappeared into the bedroom. I stared at his name written on the divorce form. What emotions did he have while writing this? Was his late return that day because he was spending time with his affair partner? I felt foolish for having supported his new job. My head spun and I felt dizzy. I couldn't think of anything. As he suggested, I decided to cool my head. I quietly gathered all my essentials and left the house. A month later, I have not returned home since that day. I tried to contact my husband a few times, but there was no response. My room was quiet and comfortable. It helped me relax and settle down. The sunlight streaming through the window brightened the room, which still lacked furniture, and added light to the living area. The ventilation was also good. When the cool air touched my cheek, I naturally took a deep breath, and the scent of wood was soothing. Just then, "Grace, are you there? Can you open the door?" I frowned at the noisy voice. It was the usual voice of my mother-in-law. I wished for a bit more consideration. I had been enjoying my comfort. Open the door. Not wanting to trouble the neighbors, I reluctantly opened the front door. "I finally found you. It's been a while," said my mother-in-law cheerfully. I pushed back as she tried to barge in. "Wait, please." "What's wrong? What happened? Can't you see? I don't want to let you in." "Well, you're quite something, aren't you?" Surprisingly, my husband was standing behind his mother, who is the young woman next to him. "The new house smells nice. I like it. It's lovely." The three of them tried to enter the house as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It was incredibly audacious. "Wait a minute. How did you find out where I live?" "Why do you ask that?" "Answer my question first. Why are you being so harsh with Caesar?" "What? Leaving everything and walking out of the house like that is unacceptable for a wife. Moreover, the reason being you don't like Tana." "Tana. So that's the young woman's name. I see. My mother-in-law approves of her. Did she say I left the house?" I felt forced out, practically evicted when my husband told me to leave. My husband, standing close to the young woman, looked at me provocatively. It's a pretty good house. The number of rooms is suitable, and your taste in interior isn't bad either. I'll forgive you for buying a new house on your own. What? But it's impossible for us to live together. Your infertility has been frowned upon by society. I'm sorry, what do you mean? You should be grateful for the time we spent together. What? I was confused and unable to understand what they were trying to say, tilting my head in bewilderment. Caesar, Tana looks tired and wants to sit down. That's right. Sorry, Tana. Grace, provide Tana a place to sit inside the house. What? No. What? Didn't you know? Tana is pregnant with Caesar's child. Pregnant? I hadn't heard about that. Yet, surprisingly, my heart remained calm. I wonder why. Was it because the succession of shocking events has numbed my sense of reality, or have my emotions become paralyzed? Pregnant women should be respected, you know? It might be hard for someone who is infertile to understand. Is that so? Haven't you realized yet? We've decided to accept Hannah as family instead of you, Grace. We want you to give up this house as part of the property settlement and leave. Yeah, get out quickly. Yes, it must have been hard for you, being infertile. They said it without any hesitation. They didn't realize their own misunderstanding. I cannot give this house as part of any property division, especially since it is my own house that you are asking me to leave from. What? Moreover, we are already divorced, aren't we? What? My husband and mother-in-law were shocked. Was it really that surprising? I had already submitted the divorce papers he filled out. Grace, what are you talking about? We were supposed to start a new life together. I have no such intention. My mother-in-law panicked and my husband became furious. Why would you say such a thing? I bought this house with my own money. What? Their disbelief was astounding. It seems he hadn't read a single email I sent. Do you really know nothing? The night my husband handed me the divorce papers, the days of endurance I had suffered through were released in an instant, enveloping me in joy. My heart was filled so much that I couldn't think of anything else. Could I now live freely? At that moment, my head spun with excitement. I signed the divorce papers with anticipation and submitted them early the next morning at the courthouse. I divided our joint savings in half and transferred it to my husband's account. Given our previous earnings, the savings were almost entirely mine, but I wanted to avoid any conflict. And then I informed him via email, let's discuss further matters through lawyers from now on. With the divided savings and a recent bonus, I acquired a new house, covering the remainder with a loan. You won't be able to get a loan. What are you talking about as a housewife? I was surprised at my husband's condescending remark. You would have a hard time getting a loan too, with all your job changes. What? You don't understand our finances. My salary is more than double yours. Perhaps hurt in his pride, my husband's face turned red and he trembled. Tana seemed taken aback. Caesar, I thought I'd be living in a brand new house, she exclaimed. Calm down, Tana. My ex-husband was in disarray. I had been the one supporting our household finances. It's unbelievable that the new wife and mother-in-law would end up living together. Grace, said my former mother-in-law, filled with anger. This is unacceptable. It's like fraud. Well, who wrote the divorce papers first? It was she, the new wife standing here, who pushed for it, thinking she would support you in the future. It's good that you have a grandchild coming. No, I will take this house, my former mother-in-law said aggressively, breathing heavily. How arrogant. That's not possible. It's a waste for you. Grace, to use this large house alone, isn't it? Actually, I plan to live here with my parents in the future. What are you saying? Even though you're just a daughter-in-law. No, I'm no longer your daughter-in-law. I have nothing to do with you anymore. I might have new encounters, but I didn't mention that to them. What are we going to do? I thought I was going to live in this house. My former mother-in-law said, disappointed. What happened to the apartment you used to live in? I asked. We sold that old property. You sold it. Yes, when I saw you moving appliances into this new house, I immediately contacted Caesar, and we decided we would live here. So, that was the situation. The only place left is the small, old one-bedroom apartment I used to live in. I felt no sympathy to them. Unlike a strong-willed career woman like you, Grace, I was hoping for a stable retirement with a compliant new wife and a grandchild and a new house. She was disappointed. Why would she say such things? I had no choice but to work hard because my husband was unreliable. I'm disappointed. But I'm going back to tell Daddy everything, Tana said defiantly, unabashed. Wait. If Dad gets angry, it'll be a mess. You better take responsibility. Please, Tana, don't do that. The reason my husband impregnated the young woman was that she was a company clerk who, emboldened at a company drinking party, quickly became involved with him. She wasn't just an employee. She turned out to be the daughter of the factory manager. Coming from a flashy high school background, she had no prior experience with men. My husband was her first, and she didn't know he was married. When she later found out he was married, she believed the classic line, "It's over with my wife. I'll get a divorce soon," and she prepared the divorce papers to give to him. She could potentially be a very thoughtful and good wife. I wish her luck. So, that's settled then. I'll leave the rest to you. Wait a minute. I felt fear as my husband tried to leave the front door open. Grace, don't you feel anything for mothers? What do you think about the life that's about to be born? Grace, if you can't pay the property division, give this house as a gift for the baby's birth. Facing my desperate ex-husband and former mother-in-law, I smiled warmly and said, "Congratulations, goodbye." I closed the door coldly and locked it. I had planned to leave it to my lawyer, but things didn't go as smoothly. Given their audacity in demanding someone else's house, they weren't likely to back down easily. Whenever my ex-husband sent bitter emails, I replied, "Please contact my lawyer," and ignored everything else. But the problem was my former mother-in-law. When she left long messages on the answering machine, it was truly exhausting. Because of you, Grace, I have no house now. At least find me another apartment. This house is too small and cramped. When I tried to get the new wife to do household chores, she told me to do it myself. What should I do now? I often feel like deleting these voicemail messages right away, but they might be useful, so I've decided to save them. The demands may increase. After all, they are quite intrusive people. One day, a visitor appeared at my home unexpectedly. The doorbell rang without any prior appointment, and thinking it could be my ex-husband, Caesar, or his mother, I clutched my phone, debating whether to call the police as I opened the door. However, a man with piercing eyes and a stern face stood before me. I tensed up. I felt like I had seen him somewhere before, but I couldn't possibly know such a menacing man. It might even be a scam disguised as door-to-door sales. Who is it? I'm Smith, the factory manager. Hearing this, I suddenly remembered. He's Tana's father, the factory manager. I remembered that she had been trying to discuss this matter with her father. Caesar and Tana, appeared behind Mr. Smith, both smiling. It seemed they had brought a powerful ally. "Please, Dad, tell her. Father-in-law, please teach her a lesson." Mr. Smith's face was marked by frowning and his lips downturned in anger. I was contemplating how to handle any demands for compensation or support for the pregnancy. I decided to call the police and was looking at my phone when, at that moment, this time, "Yes, what is it?" Mr. Smith said very loudly, "I'm truly sorry." After saying that, the factory manager, Mr. Smith, grabbed the heads of my ex-husband, Caesar and Tana forcefully, apologized to her properly. "What?" "It hurts. My neck is going to break." "Dad, what are you doing? This isn't what we talked about." I watched the scene in astonishment. What was happening? Don't misunderstand. I brought you here to apologize to her. What? I'm truly sorry. I heard that my daughter stole your husband and then even demanded your house. Yes, that's correct. Caesar and Tana began to look unsettled. Dad, you knew about this. Yes. All that talk about being deceived or having your house taken away was all lies, wasn't it? Where did you hear that? Your mother told me everything. Mr. Smith, visibly angry, clenched his teeth. According to him, my former mother-in-law had been pressuring him, saying, "Now that your daughter has taken my son, we should get along as relatives, in various aspects. You can satisfy us by buying us an apartment. Of course, you are free to visit any time." Of course, Mr. Smith firmly refused. I was dumbfounded by such audacity. The person who said that was my former mother-in-law, always making convenient stories. I am disappointed in you and your mother. How could this be? I love only my wife. Stop this nonsense. Stop it, Dad. You're scaring me. You're the same. What? Just because you're my only precious daughter doesn't mean you should act spoiled. Both of you are useless in the factory. There's a very demanding workplace out there. Go gain some experience there before you come back. What? Mr. Smith said this to my ex-husband and Tana, and then turned to me. Does this suffice as an apology? Yes. But why are you doing this? Let's continue to keep in touch. I was utterly confused about what was happening, stared at his face, and then it dawned on me. Yes, it was a long time ago. He was the head of the administrative department of a company I used to deal with when I was in sales. I'm truly sorry for not recognizing you. Due to a business merger, I'm now managing a newly built factory. It's understandable you didn't recognize me. I see. I couldn't believe it when I first learned your husband was working at our factory. Mr. Smith seemed troubled as he looked away. Is my ex-husband causing any problems? He has a poor work attitude, doesn't learn his duties, and takes days off without permission. The image of my ex-husband not taking his work seriously came to mind, but it wasn't surprising. No longer his wife, I could do nothing but offer a wry smile in response. We plan to retrain him from scratch. He won't be coming back here anymore. My ex-husband shrank back, and Tana looked offended. You were always good at training new employees, weren't you? Yes, very strictly and thoroughly. I'll support from afar. Even with the factory manager's influence, my ex-husband's rehabilitation looks doubtful. Ultimately, he needs to make a fresh start and put in the effort himself, especially for the sake of the innocent child that is on the way. There is one thing I regret not clarifying: the misconception that the infertility issues were my fault. Long ago, we visited a hospital together to investigate the cause of our infertility. There was no issue found with me, but my husband was diagnosed with a sperm problem. Although it was said that natural conception would be difficult, it was not impossible. The fact that Tana became pregnant from a single encounter with my ex-husband could be seen as miraculous. Or perhaps it was just fate. Or maybe he wasn't the father at all. I don't know, and it doesn't matter to me anymore. I also received a follow-up from the factory manager during a business update. Ultimately, the couple and my former mother-in-law lived in that old, cramped one-bedroom apartment for a while. They were told by the factory manager to try and make it on their own as a condition to live together with him in the future. Although they pledged to save for the baby and commit seriously to their jobs, Tana quickly became unable to cope with the new lifestyle. It was just as I had anticipated. My husband may not realize this since I used to manage our finances, but living on his income alone is extremely difficult and perhaps impossible. If the three of them live freely without saving, the money split at the time of our divorce will quickly run out. Tana returned to her parents' home after giving birth and never came back. Meanwhile, my ex-husband grew to dislike his job and quit. In a panic, my former mother-in-law demanded her daughter and grandchild back, which led to her visiting the factory manager's home and subsequently caused a disturbance that resulted in the police being called. Truly shameful. Everyone is too selfish. However, it's no longer my concern, so I refrained from asking for further updates. I wish Mr. Smith the best. My new home is very comfortable. Being alone can be lonely, and sometimes I worry about what I would do if I fell ill, but having my husband around never really made things better. Living alone isn't different from what I've been doing all along. I always believed that spouses should support each other, but in reality, it was just my husband relying entirely on me. The absence of someone who was never truly needed has not caused any inconvenience. 7 years have passed, and my parents, whom I brought from my hometown, now live with me in my well-acquainted home. Additionally, a former colleague from my sales department days also lives with us. He was once a top competitor of mine, consistently excelling in performance. After I moved to the planning department, the competition dwindled, and it seems he missed our occasional encounters. I felt the same way. Knowing about my divorce, he promptly proposed a relationship, and now he has become a husband in whom I can place my complete trust. Having worked together for a long time, we can talk about anything without reservation. He is an ideal partner. I look forward to continuing our life together.